When I think about our little patch of land, a little dot, a little pinprick on this planet, and I think about our grandchildren, you do feel a huge sense of responsibility to do something, to not be idle, because those days are gone and time's running out.
Over the last 5 years, the Catchment Action Program has supported probably over 130 projects that support healthy soils, river restoration, wildlife corridors and bush regeneration projects. Ultimately, the aim is to connect habitat corridors and waterways from the escarpment to the sea, but the Catchment Action Program is really critical in kind of building that capacity in the landholder.
So these are our first berries.
Ultimately, we'd like to be able to have the landholder be the steward of this beautiful landscape, and I think that's the best part of the program for me, is watching landholders grow with their projects. So I get to hear their vision from the start, and then I get to watch it manifest.
We've planted over 30 species of rainforests now.
I see the landholders just learn all about, what they're actually doing and how they're intimately engaging with the land, and that's the most valuable thing I think that the program provides.
We're on the escarpment at Tapatali. This is our property where we've done a bit of regeneration. This is a 5-year project. It'll take that long for the trees to get big enough so we start to get a canopy. This was covered in lantana. You couldn't even walk through here when we started it. And now we're having this amazing experience of watching everything grow up. The red cedar was the main tree and they were logged here, and some of the land was farmed. When that was abandoned, the lantana just came in and took over. So our idea is plant lots of trees, create a canopy, because lantana doesn't grow too well under a canopy. There's a section of our property a bit higher up where we have the turpentine forest, and under the turpentine forest there's very little lantana growing there. It's because they're established trees and we've already got a nice canopy there. I wanted to show you this one that's one of my favourite, the Moreton Bay fig. And it was probably about that tall when we planted it. So it's done this in 2 years, which is pretty amazing. We couldn't have done this without the local land services grants that we got, because it's quite an expensive adventure here. At first we had contractors come in with an excavator, made some tracks down through to the bottom of our property. We did some spraying, we did a lot of hand clearing, and the cages and the star pickets are a huge expense, and we've planted on our property probably 500 trees now, and we couldn't have done all of that without some help. When we first applied for this grant, one of our objectives was to create a corridor along the escarpment, knowing that neighbouring properties had already done a lot of work. I'm a mad bird watcher, and we've already recorded over 80 species of birds on our property. And we've planted different species so that all year round you'll have something in flowers, so there's always something there for the wildlife and the birds, and that's my dream, to provide a habitat, a place for the animals to live safely and have food.
So we have here a small segment of the Illawarra lowlands grassy woodland. So the species of trees and shrubs we've grown are consistent with that. The intention is to revegetate the gullies, plant a broad range of trees and shrubs and grasses that fit with the local environmental communities. So this is a local Melaleuca, and you can see he's doing quite well. He's starting to grow on the top there. He's got his feet in the ground there and he's quite happy. We felt that if we put some work and time into it, we could improve the wooded areas by removing lantana and privet and revegetating those areas, improve the biodiversity of the farm. And we could see that we could make a contribution to improvement of the land over a period of time. We've had 2 grants here on the farm. The main initial work was to clean out the dams and fence off the dams so that cattle aren't going in and out of the dams. That improves the quality of the water, both on farm but off farm as it makes its way down gullies. Taking the time to do that was essential before we introduced cattle into the property. Previously, the land hadn't been rested to any great extent, so I felt the first thing we could do is to take the cattle off and give it a rest. It does encourage native species, grasses, to reappear. It tells you that the seed bank is quite resilient, that there's quite a lot of seed there that, given the opportunity to grow, will grow. And now we have some Solanum salatum, which is a beautiful Australian shrub, which is only found in the area from Wollongong to Nowra and out to Bungonia, and it's a threatened species. So it was quite exciting. For us to be able to do that and be supported by the local land service grants has enabled that to happen more quickly and more effectively.
Riverwatch's key role is to look after the health and productivity of the Shoalhaven River, and we also care for the tributaries of the river, which Tapatali Creek is one of. We don't mind at Riverwatch which land we're working on, whether it be publicly owned or privately owned. I just think it's really important that we all work together as a community, government, landholders and volunteers like ourselves. So we've been successful in getting a number of grants over many years. We do work on the river itself, planting of mangroves, planting of casuarinas, fencing off the river, mainly from dairy cattle and things like that. I think it's really important to work on areas that adjoin rivers or creeks or wetlands, because those areas are biodiversity hotspots. Once you get trees in there, you end up with insects coming, birds coming, and all of a sudden they're just this river of life. By using the rivers to join up areas of bushland, you then create that connectivity, and it's like a habitat corridor. The other thing it does is improves water quality downstream in particular, because you're not having all that sediment go into the river and into the water. It also improves productivity in land adjacent to these habitat corridors. Slows down the wind, slows down the drying out, and also creates like an arbour for beneficial insects and birds to live in and control pests and diseases on the paddocks adjoining. What we were really amazed at is once we started work on Tapatali Creek, stabilising the banks and planting trees, just how quickly those trees grow. Particularly in the coastal areas, the growth rate is astounding.
This area was cleared in the 1800s. It used to be a beautiful rainforest area, and the soils are really fertile because of that forest. And we'd like to introduce some of that rainforest back to the property. I think when the land was originally cleared, there was this perception that trees reduced the productivity of the land. But the reality is that the trees are slowing down the wind, they're creating shade, and it improves the productivity of the cattle because they're happier and they're healthier and they're eating more. So that actually boosts the productivity of the land. We've prepared a farm plan and we've identified that 10 or 20% of the property we could plant to trees, and we don't think we'll lose any productivity out of that.
We have got very undulating land here, and so there are some ephemeral gullies that then lead into the creeks that then lead out to the ocean. So this is all part of an ecosystem where we really want to protect the upper parts of the catchment. When rain events come, then you have all this soil running off, so you want to keep the soil on the property. The soils are very important to allow a different mix of pasture species to grow, and that is of course then very good for grazing animals. The cattle very much benefit if we run the property in such a way that they have the ability to get rotated through the paddocks regularly. It will reduce any worm burden they may have, it gives them fresh food every day, it makes the pastures much more productive. And if we plant a lot of trees that are shelter belts and provide habitat for other things, it makes the property much more healthy, but it also gives the cattle good environment to be in. And so we contacted local land services and got a grant, and it was really wonderful because it allowed us to put in fencing with mesh that even keeps the kangaroos out and the wombats. And so now the trees really have a good chance in their gullies to come up and grow. We have a whole big spectrum of species that we have been putting out. Anything from eucalypt to the various rainforest canopy species. We needed thousands and thousands of trees to put out on this place. So we got some help from Landcare Illawarra to help us collect the seed and put them into our little plant nursery that we built and raise them ourselves, so that we've always got a stock of trees that we can put out into our planting sites. Planting the tree itself is only 5 minutes worth of work. The hard thing is you again got to make the tree survive there, and you have to keep the grass and the weeds off them. And that probably will take you a year or a year and a half of looking after them until they have really reached a height above the grass that they can then start to outcompete the grass. I cannot wait for the day when they are finally going to be 3 and 4 meters high, and I can walk through these trees and see all these different species that we've been able to support and give them habitat again.
The long-term trajectory of rain is down. Likewise, the annual temperatures have a trajectory up. And I often walk out into the pasture here and I think, what should I be doing now? How can I mitigate against climate change? How can I best prepare my property to be resilient?
The value has been in landholders really seeing that integrating natural resource management with agriculture and productivity go hand in hand, and you can't have one without the other. If you're the keeper of a piece of land, if you're a land manager, instead of looking at the land and saying, what can I take? Rather look at the land and go, what can I do to support this land so that I prosper and the land prospers for future generations?